You're nothing, just an ant playing dress-up in a world you'll never understand." Julian Thorne roared, pinning the waitress against the cold stainless steel of the service corridor. The billionaire CEO sneered at Mia's cheap shoes, oblivious to the fact that the woman he was calling a nothing was the sole heir to the $30 billion empire he spent every hour trying to protect. As the security guards looked away, Mia didn't crumble or cry. She simply tilted her head, her gaze shifting from submissive to sovereign. "If I am nothing, Julian," she whispered, with a bone-chilling calm, "then why do you work for me?" The Orion restaurant was not a place. It was a performance, suspended 50 floors above Manhattan. It was a galaxy of Michelin stars, soft lighting, and the discreet murmur of old money. For Amelia Davenport, known here only as Mia, it was the front line. For the past 6 weeks, Mia had lived a life of deliberate fiction. By day, she was the sole anonymous heir to the $30 billion Davenport Hospitality Group, DHG, an empire of luxury hotels that included the very building she was standing in. By night, she was a waitress earning $15 an hour, plus tips a role she'd taken to understand the legacy her late father Arthur Davenport had left her. "Mia, table 7 water refills now?" Mia nodded at Marcus, the perpetually stressed restaurant manager. On at Marcus, her feet throbbed in the standard-issue black flats. Her disguise was simple. Her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, no makeup, and her father's priceless signet ring replaced by a simple silver band her roommate Chloe had bought at a street fair. She shared a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Queens with Chloe, an aspiring actress who knew her only as a fellow struggler trying to pay off non-existent student loans. The job was grueling. It wasn't just the physical toll, it was the psychic one. It was the experience of being looked through, of being seen not as a person, but as a function, a hand to refill a glass, a voice to take an order. Tonight the restaurant was electric with a nervous energy. The entire hotel was on edge. The king was in the building. Julian Thorne. Mia had never seen him, but his name was a curse whispered in the service corridors. Thorne was the CEO of DHG, a self-made billionaire recruited by her father 5 years ago to run the public F-facing side of the company. He was a shark, a genius, and a tyrant. He had doubled DHG's stock price, but his staff turnover was legendary. "He's on his way up," Marcus hissed, straightening his tie for the 10th time. He booked the summit table. "Mayor, you and Sarah are handling that section. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make mistakes. Do not breathe wrong. Got it? Got it." Mayor said, her stomach tightening. This was why she was here. Her father's lawyer, Mr. Grayson, the only person in the world who knew her plan, had warned her. Arthur built DHG on respect, Amelia he'd said over tea last month. Thorne builds it on fair. Before you take your seat at the head of the table, you need to know who's sharpening their knives. A hush fell over the dining room. The elevator doors slid open with a sound like a guillotine. He was tall, impossibly sharp, in a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than her share of the rent for a year. He had dark hair, a severe jaw, and eyes so pale and cold they looked like chips of ice. He wasn't just a man. He was a presence radiating an aura of absolute impatient control. He was followed by a woman, Victoria Blackstone, a rival real estate mogul, and 2 other severe-looking men in suits. "Mr. Thorne?" Marcus greeted him, his voice trembling slightly. "Your table is ready." Julian Thorne didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone. He just swept past, his gaze fixed on the skyline as if the mortals arranging his seating were beneath his notice. Maya grabbed the silver water pitcher, her hand surprisingly steady. The king was in his castle, and she was the invisible girl holding the tray. Mia's section included the summit table, a semi-private alcove with a panoramic view of the city. As she approached, she kept her eyes down just as she'd been trained. And that's why the Montlair acquisition is critical. Victoria Julian Thorne was saying, his voice a low, precise rumble. He gestured dismissively with a hand. "The board is weak. They're still in mourning, and the heir is a ghost, an invisible trust fund brat who's never worked a day in her life." Mia's hand tightened on the pitcher. She began pouring water for Victoria Blackstone, who was draped in a Cartier diamond necklace. "They say she's a child, Julian," Victoria purred, placing a hand on his arm. "Someone you can easily manage." "I can manage anything," Julian said. "But the fact is the company is vulnerable until I secure the Montclair deal. This isn't the time for some phantom Aries to play CEO. This company is what it is because I built it. Arthur Davenport just laid the foundation." Mia bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted copper. "My father gave you this world," she thought. "And you call him a foundation?" She moved to pour Julian's water. He didn't look up, still deep in conversation. As she reached a busboy, a nervous teenager named Leo rushed past her to clear plates from the next table. He stumbled, jostling Mia's arm. It was a tiny error. A few drops of ice water splashed onto the immaculate sleeve of Julian Thorne's suit. The world stopped. Victoria Blackstone gasped. The two executives froze. Leo looked like he was about to faint. Julian Thorne slowly, deliberately looked down at the water drops on his 5,000 solo suit. Then he lifted his icy gaze not to Mia, but to Leo. "You," he said, his voice terrifyingly soft. "Sir, I'm so sorry, Leo stammered. "Get him out of here," Julian said to Marcus, who had sprinted over. "Mr. Thorne, it was an accident," Marcus began. "He's incompetent. And you?" Julian snapped, finally turning to Marcus. "Are a terrible manager. This is my flagship restaurant, and you're running it like a roadside diner. You're both fired," No Mayor said. The word was out before she could stop it. It was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a shot. Julian Thorne's head swiveled. For the first time he looked at her. His gaze wasn't just cold, it was dissecting. He was seeing her. The cheap uniform, the plain face, the defiance in her eyes. "What did you say?" he asked. Mia stood tall. Her heart was hammering, but her voice was clear. "I said, no, it wasn't his fault or Marcus. It was a simple accident. I bumped into him. If you're going to fire someone, fire me." There was a long, agonizing pause. Julian studied her. It was the look of a predator analyzing, clears throat, an unknown and slightly annoying species of prey. He was processing the fact that a waitress was contradicting him. "You?" he finally said, a slow, condescending smile touching his lips. He leaned back. "And who are you?" "She's Mia, sir. One of our waitresses," Marcus interjected, trying to save her. "Maya the waitress," Julian mused, as if testing the name of an insect. He looked her up and down. "You have spirit. It's misplaced and utterly useless, but it's there." He turned to Marcus. "He's fired," he said, pointing to Leo. "You're on probation." He then looked back at Mia. "And you get me a new napkin and stay out of my way." He dismissed her. Just like that, the encounter was over. He had already turned back to Victoria, resuming his conversation about the Montclair deal, as if nothing had happened. As Mia walked away, her entire body shaking, she wasn't just angry, she was terrified. Not of him, but for her company. Mr. Grayson was right. This man had no respect. He had only power. And she, Amelia Davenport, was just a nothing in a black apron. The incident with Leo became legend among the staff. Mia was the one who talked back to Thorne. But Julian, it seemed, had forgotten her existence the moment she'd left his table, or so she thought. A week later, Mia was in the hotel's main lobby, having been sent on an errand to deliver a new seating chart to the concierge. The lobby of the Davenport Grand was a cathedral of commerce with a soaring atrium and a constant hushed flow of the global elite. She saw him before he saw her. Julian Thorne was standing near the grand staircase berating Robert Vance, the Vice President of Operations. "I don't care what the Savoy in London is offering. I want their top clientele, and I want them poached by the end of the quarter." Julian snapped his voice, echoing slightly in the vast space. "Make it happen, or I'll find someone who will." "Julian, it's not that simple," Vance argued, sweating in his expensive suit. "We're already stretched thin with the Montclair negotiations." "Do not," Julian interrupted, stepping closer to the older man. "Tell me what is not simple, Robert." I pay you a seven-figure salary to solve not simple problems. As Vance wilted, Julian turned and his eyes landed directly on Mia. He stopped. His expression was one of mild annoyance, as if finding a bug on his windshield. He walked toward her. She stood frozen by the concierge desk. "You," he said. He didn't use her name. "You're the waitress from Orion." "Yes, sir. I was just delivering eavesdropping." He cut her off, his eyes narrowing. "No, sir. I was just passing by." He circled her slowly, like a shark. "You're a long way from the restaurant. Or perhaps you're branching out looking for a new billionaire's sleeve to spill water on." The concierge looked down, pretending to be intensely busy. "I told you that was an accident," Mia said, her voice low. "I'm sure it was." He stopped in front of her. He was so close she could smell the clean, sharp scent of his cologne. A piece of advice Mare the waitress. People who exist in the background should stay in the background. When you try to step into the light, you get burned. You are a small cog in a very large machine. "Do you understand?" "I understand my job, Mr. Thorne." I doubt that he said. "Your job is to be invisible, but you twice now have failed at that simple task. It makes me wonder if you're ambitious or just stupid." This was a test. He was baiting her. He was the kind of man who enjoyed watching people squirm. Mia refused to give him the satisfaction. She looked him straight in the eye. "My ambition, sir, is to do my job well. My father always told me that all honest work has dignity." Julian's face flickered. The mention of a father seemed to annoy him. How quaint. He sneered. "Your father was wrong. In this world, there is dignity only in winning. Remember that." He turned and strode away, leaving her standing in the opulent lobby, her blood boiling. He wasn't just arrogant. He was a bully, convinced that his wealth and position made him a superior form of human. That night, she called Mr. Grayson. "Amelia, your 6 weeks are almost up. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. You need to come in." Grayson urged, his voice tinny over the phone. Clear his throat. "I need more time." Mr. Grayson Mayer insisted, pacing her small queen's bedroom, while Chloe watched a bad reality show in the next room. "Thorne is worse than we thought. He's systematically replacing my father's people with his own. He's bleeding the company of its soul, and he's obsessed with this Montclair deal. The deal is sound, Amelia. It will make the company the largest luxury provider in the world." "But at what cost?" Mia whispered. "He's creating a culture of fear. I can't take over a company that despises its own employees." "Then you need to find a way to control him." "Clear his throat," Grayson said. "And you can't do that wearing an apron." "No." Mia said, a new hard resolve setting in. "I think the apron is the only way. He's exposed right now. He's arrogant, and he doesn't see me. I'm going to find out everything." "Be careful, Amelia. A man like Julian Thorne doesn't just crush his enemies. He annihilates them." The next week, everything changed. A story broke in the Wall Street Journal outlining the exact terms of DHG's confidential bid for the Montclair Group. It was a catastrophic leak. Montclair's stock shot up, and their board publicly announced they were re-evaluating all offers, effectively starting a bidding war. The Davenport Grand Hotel felt like a war zone. Julian Thorne was on the hunt. Mia heard the whispers from every department. He had fired 2 high-level VPs and the entire IT security team for the breach. He was, according to Marcus, who was now mainlining anti-SIDS, a caged lion. That evening, Mia got an urgent call from Mr. Grayson. Clear his throat. "Amelia, it's worse than the papers are reporting." Grayson said, his voice grim. "Julian is convinced the leak came from you." "Me? That's insane. No one even knows who I am." Clear his throat. "He doesn't think you leaked it. He thinks the new owner, the invisible brat, leaked it to sabotage him to," clear his throat, "make him look weak before the board meeting so you can oust him and install your own puppet." Mia's blood ran cold. He's projecting. He's paranoid. "If he thinks I'm his enemy, he'll burn the company to the ground just to spite me. He's moving to secure his position. Grayson said he's calling an emergency board meeting for Friday. He's going to use this leak to argue for full autonomy, to restructure the board, and to lock you out of operations indefinitely. He's staging a corporate coup, Amelia. You have until Friday. You have to find the real mole. Mia hung up. Friday. That was 48 hours. She was no longer an AWIS observing. She was a target. She had to think. If Julian was looking for a traitor on the executive floor, he was looking in the wrong place. The executives were terrified of him. Clear's throat. The mole had to be someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who benefited from Julian's failure. Robert Vance, the VP of operations, the man Julian had humiliated in the lobby. Vance was one of her father's old guard appointees. He despised Julian. He saw him as a vulgar usurper. What if Vance leaked the deal, not to make money, but to destroy Julian, paving the way for the rightful heir, Mia, to take over with him as her grateful second in command? It was a long shot, but it was all she had. She had to watch him. For the next 24 hours, Mia used her invisibility as a weapon. She called in sick to her shift at Orion, and using the all-access staff credentials Grayson had insisted she carry for emergencies, she moved through the hotel's back-of-house like a ghost. She watched Vance from the security hub, telling the staff she was on a cross-reining exercise for Marcus. She saw him make a dozen furtive calls. She followed him at a distance to the hotel's lower-level bar. The Foundry. She sat in a dark booth, a baseball cap pulled low, and watched. At 10 p.m., a man slid into Vance's booth. He wasn't a corporate rival. He was a journalist. David Chen, a notorious financial reporter known for breaking corporate scandals. Maya recognized him from a Forbes profile. She moved to the booth behind them, straining to hear. The second half of the data, Chen was saying, "You got what you wanted, David." Vance muttered, sliding a USB drive across the table. "The Montlair deal is dead. Thorne is finished. When Miss Davenport takes over, she'll see who was loyal." "And you're sure this is everything?" Chen asked. "It's more," Vance said with a grim smile. "It's Thorne's personal playbook. His strategies for the next 5 years, his private files on the other board members, blackmail, everything. This won't just get him fired, it will put him in prison." Mia's stomach turned to lead. This wasn't about saving the company. This was a personal vendetta. Vance was about to leak data that would not just destroy Julian, but would the entire Davenport group for a decade. She had the mole, but she had a bigger problem. She had to save Julian Thorne. She couldn't go to security. Vance would just deny it. She couldn't go to Grayson. It was too late. She had to stop Chen from leaving the building with that drive. She walked back to the staff area, her mind racing. She returned to the bar, no longer a shadow, but a waitress. She was carrying a tray with 2 whizzies. She walked directly to their table. "Excuse me, Mr. Vance," she said. Vance looked up, his face pale with panic. "Maya, what the hell are you doing here?" "Your drink, sir," she said brightly, and she tripped. The tray went flying. The 2 glasses of expensive whiskey shattered all over David Chen, drenching his suit, his phone, and his laptop bag on the floor. "Ah, my God!" Chen yelled, leaping up. "I'm so sorry. I'm so clumsy." Mia cried, grabbing napkins. Amid the chaos, as Chen frantically tried to save his phone and Vance yelled at her, Mia's hand snatched the USB drive from the puddle of whiskey on the table, palming it in an instant. "You idiot!" Vance roared. "Get out! Just get out!" Chen screamed. Mia fled, her heart pounding. She ran to the service stairs, clutching the small, wet USB drive. She had the evidence, but she also had a new enemy. Robert Vance knew she had taken it. She ran straight to the penthouse elevator, Julian's private elevator. She used her master key credentials. She had to give this to him now. But as the elevator doors opened, she didn't see Julian. She saw 2 hotel security guards. "Mia," one said, confused. "I need to see Mr. Thorne." "I'm afraid," said a smooth voice behind her, "that Mr. Thorne is busy." Robert Vance stepped out from an alcove, his suit jacket off his face, dark with rage. "Security, this waitress just assaulted a guest and stole my property. Take her." The service corridor outside the Orion kitchen was cold metallic and smelled faintly of bleach and prime rib. It was a place of frantic motion, of clattering plates and shouted orders, but right now it was dead silent. The 2 security guards held Mia's arms. Robert Vance stood before her, his face a mask of triumph. "You made a very big mistake, little girl," Vance hissed. "You should have stayed where you belonged." He patted his pockets. "Now give it to me." "I don't know what you're talking about." Mia said, her mind racing. The USB drive was digging into her palm. "The drive, you stole it. Give it to me or I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage." Arrested? A new voice cut through the tension. Clear his throat, Julian Thorne stepped into the corridor. He looked exhausted. His tie was loose and his eyes were hollow with rage. He had clearly been pulling an all-nighter trying to save the Montclair deal. He looked at the scene, the guards, the furious VP and the defiant waitress with utter contempt. "What is this Robert A. melodrama?" Julian Vance said, plastering on a look of concern. "Thank God I found the mole. It's her." Julian's gaze snapped to Mia. It was not a look of surprise. It was a look of confirmation. He said, his voice flat. "Yes, I saw her in the foundry passing a USB drive to that vulture David Chen. She was selling us out. When I confronted her, she ran. She still has the drive." Mia's heart stopped. He twisted it. He saw me take it and twisted it. "Is this true?" Julian asked, walking slowly toward Mia. "No, he's lying." "Mia," Clear's throat, said, struggling against the guards. "He's the mole. He was giving the drive to Chen. It's not just the deal. It's your personal files. Your blackmail on the board." Vance laughed. "Julian, are you going to believe me, your VP of operations? Your colleague for 5 years, or this minimum wage? Nothing who you caught eavesdropping outside your office just last week?" Julian stopped inches from Mia. He looked at her, his eyes unreadable. He saw the waitress who had talked back to him. The waitress who had been passing by in the lobby, the waitress who had accidentally spilled a drink on a reporter. It all clicked in his paranoid, exhausted mind. He saw the perfect scapegoat. "She's been spying on me," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. "The invisible brat the heir. She's been using you, hasn't she, feeding you information to pass to the press?" "No," Mia cried. "Mr. Thorne, you have to listen to me." "I've listened enough," he roared. The controls snapped. The pressure of the last 48 hours exploded. He was a king watching his kingdom crumble, and he had just found his court traitor. He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her skin like a vice. "You think you're clever, don't you, listening in passing notes? You thought you could play in the big leagues." He dragged her away from the guards, pinning her against the stainless steel wall. "I have built this empire. I dragged it single-handedly into the 21st century. I have sacrificed everything. And you with your cheap shoes and your 15-hour ambition, you think you can tear it down." "Julian, stop," Vance said, pretending to be concerned. "Shut up, Robert," Julian yelled. He was focused entirely on Mia, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. He saw her as the embodiment of the invisible brat Ace, the trust fund baby who was trying to destroy him. "You're just a girl playing dress-up in a world you can't possibly understand. You have no idea how the real world works. You are a pawn. You are an ant. You're nothing." He shouted the last word, his voice echoing in the metallic hallway. The kitchen went silent. The guards looked away. Mia stopped struggling. The fury in her eyes died, replaced by an arctic calm. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just stared back at him, her gaze unwavering. She waited for the echo of his voice to fade, and then, in the dead ringing silence, she spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it was clearer and heavier than any sound in the building. "Then, why do you work for me?" Julian Thorne froze. The rage on his face didn't fade. It fractured, replaced by a profound, uncomprehending confusion. What did you say?" "She's delirious, Julian," Vance said, stepping forward. Mia ignored him. Her eyes never left Julian's. "I said," she repeated, enunciating every syllable. "If I am nothing, then why do you work for me?" She raised her hand, the one clutching the USB drive. "Robert is right about one thing. You are being betrayed." She looked at Vance, but not by me. "Guards, grab her," Vance commanded. "Stand down." The voice was new. It came from the end of the hall. Mr. Grayson, flanked by two more security guards. Real security, not just hotel staff, walked calmly into the corridor. Julian released Mia's arm, stepping back as if he'd been burned. Grayson Julian said, confused, "What are you doing here? This is a staff-only area." "I am here," Grayson said, his voice like gravel. At the request of my client, he stopped beside Mia, who never broke her stare with Julian. "Clears throat. Julian Thorne." Mr. Grayson said, his voice formal. "Robert Vance. May I introduce Miss Amelia Davenport, the sole heir to Arthur Davenport and the majority shareholder and chairwoman of the board for Davenport Hospitality Group." The silence in the corridor was absolute. It was so total that Mia could hear the quiet hiss of the ice machine from the kitchen 20 yards away. Robert Vance's face went from smug to ashen. He looked, Mia thought, like a man who had just swallowed glass. Julian Thorne just stared. His brilliant analytical mind was visibly trying to process the information, trying to reconcile the image of the defiant waitress with the name Amelia Davenport, the invisible brat, the trust fund baby, the nothing. He looked at her simple black uniform. He looked at her hair pulled back in its severe bun. He looked at her cheap, sensible shoes. "No," he whispered. It wasn't a denial. It was a plea. Mr. Thorne Mayer said, her voice now resonating with an authority he had never heard. "You just assaulted your boss. And you," she said, turning to Vance, "just tried to have her arrested." Vance lunged. "She's lying. Grayson. She's—" The two new security guards who answered only to Grayson, and the Davenport family had Vance's arms behind his back in a second. "She has my USB drive." Vance shrieked. "It has my financials on it." "This drive?" Mia asked, holding it up. She looked at Grayson. "Mr. Grayson, please have our tech team dump the contents of this drive. I believe you'll find it contains Mr. Thorne's entire 5-year strategic plan, plus his private opposition research on the board." Mr. Vance was handing it to David Chen of the Wall Street Journal when I intervened. Grayson took the drive. "It will be done, Miss Davenport." "Wait," Julian said. His voice was... he was still reeling. His entire world tilted off its axis. You were a waitress." "Yes." Amelia said, "My father always told me you can't run a hotel from the penthouse. You have to know what the Polish smells like. I came to see what he built. Instead, I found you." She turned to her security. "Take Mr. Vance to the security office. Hold him. Do not let him speak to anyone." As Vance was dragged away, still protesting, Amelia turned back to Julian Thorne. He hadn't moved. He looked like one of the marble statues in the lobby, pale and cold. "I believe," she said, smoothing the front of her waitress uniform, "that we have a board meeting to attend. My office now." She didn't wait for him. She simply turned and walked toward the executive elevator. Mr. Grayson falling into step beside her. Julian Thorne, the billionaire king. The tyrant of the 50th floor stood frozen in the service corridor for a full 10 seconds. Then, slowly mechanically, he followed. The walk to the elevator was the longest of his life. They passed the Orion host stand. Marcus, the manager, saw them. He saw Mia, his troublemaking but hard-working waitress, walking shoulder to shoulder with the family's ancient, powerful lawyer. And he saw Julian Thorne, the CEO, trailing 3 paces behind them, his face a mask of utter devastation. Marcus just stared, his mouth open, as the bronze doors of the private elevator slid shut. The ride to the penthouse was silent. Amelia stood at the front, watching the numbers climb. Grayson stood at her side. Julian stood in the back, staring at the back of her head. He was replaying every interaction. People who exist in the background should stay in the background. I doubt that your job is to be invisible ambitious or just stupid. Dignity is only in winning. You are nothing. He felt physically ill. The doors opened onto the CEO's private landing. The office was a vast expanse of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. It had been Julian's sanctuary, his throne room. Amelia walked past the enormous mahogany desk. She didn't sit in his chair. She sat in one of the plush visitors' chairs, crossing her legs. She looked for all the world like a queen holding court in the enemy's castle. "Sit down, Julian," she said. He sat. The silence in the corridor was absolute. It was so total that Mia could hear the quiet hiss of the ice machine from the kitchen 20 yards away. Robert Vance's face went from smug to ashen. He looked, Mia thought, like a man who had just swallowed glass. Julian Thorne just stared. His brilliant analytical mind was visibly trying to process the information, trying to reconcile the image of the defiant waitress with the name Amelia Davenport, the invisible brat, the trust fund, baby the nothing. He looked at her simple black uniform. He looked at her hair pulled back in its severe bun. He looked at her cheap, sensible shoes. "No," he whispered. "It wasn't a denial. It was a plea. Mr. Thorne." Maya said, her voice now resonating with an authority he had never heard. "You just assaulted your boss, and you," she said, turning to Vance, "just tried to have her arrested." Vance lunged. "She's lying, Grayson." He's the two new security guards who answered only to Grayson, and the Davenport family had Vance's arms behind his back in a second. "She has my USB drive," Vance shrieked. "It has my financials on it." "This drive?" Mayer asked, holding it up. She looked at Grayson. "Mr. Grayson, please have our tech team dump the contents of this drive. I believe you'll find it contains Mr. Thorne's entire 5-year strategic plan, plus his private opposition research on the board." Mr. Vance was handing it to David Chen of the Wall Street Journal when I intervened. Grayson took the drive. "It will be done, Miss Davenport." "Wait," Julian said. He was still reeling. His entire world tilted off its axis. You were a waitress." "Yes," Amelia said. "My father always told me you can't run a hotel from the penthouse. You have to know what the Polish smells like. I came to see what he built. Instead, I found you." She turned to her security. "Take Mr. Vance to the security office. Hold him. Do not let him speak to anyone." As Vance was dragged away, still protesting, Amelia turned back to Julian Thorne. He hadn't moved. He looked like one of the marble statues in the lobby, pale and cold. "I believe," she said, smoothing the front of her waitress uniform, "that we have a board meeting to attend. My office now." She didn't wait for him. She simply turned and walked toward the executive elevator. Mr. Grayson falling into step beside her. Julian Thorne, the billionaire king. The tyrant of the 50th floor stood frozen in the service corridor for a full 10 seconds. Then slowly, mechanically, he followed. The walk to the elevator was the longest of his life. They passed the Orion host stand. Marcus, the manager, saw them. He cleared his throat, saw Mia, his troublemaking but hard-working waitress, walking shoulder to shoulder with the family's ancient, powerful lawyer. And he saw Julian Thorne, the CEO, trailing 3 paces behind them, his face a mask of utter devastation. Marcus just stared, his mouth open, as the bronze doors of the private elevator slid shut. The ride to the penthouse was silent. Amelia stood at the front, watching the numbers climb. Grayson stood at her side. Julian stood in the back, staring at the back of her head. His world reduced to the hum of the elevator. He was replaying every interaction. People who exist in the background should stay in the background. I doubt that. Your job is to be invisible, ambitious, or just stupid. Dignity is only in winning. Clear his throat. You are nothing. He felt physically ill. The doors opened onto the CEO's private landing. The office was a vast expanse of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. It had been Julian's sanctuary, his throne room. Amelia walked past the enormous mahogany desk. She ran her hand over the wood. She looked at the photos of Julian on the cover of Forbes and Fortune. Then she turned not to sit in his chair, but to perch on the edge of the desk, looking down at him. Mr. Grayson stood by the door, a silent sentinel. "Sit down, Julian," she said. It was not a request. He obeyed, sinking into one of the plush visitors' chairs that until this moment had been for other people. 6 weeks, she began, her voice quiet, but filling the enormous room. 42 days I started in laundry. Do you know what the basement laundry room smells like at 3 a.m.? Julian, It smells like bleach and steam and exhaustion. It's the engine of this hotel. You've never been there? I know because I checked the security logs. He said nothing, just stared at his hands. Then I was a maid housekeeping on the 35th floor. She continued. I worked with a woman named Sophia. She's been with DHG for 25 years since before my father bought this building. Last month, you saw her service cart in the hallway as you were heading to the spa. You told her, and I quote, "Your clutter is an insult to the guests." You didn't know she was on her way to clean a $10,000 a night suite that a rock star had just destroyed. You didn't know her husband had just died from cancer. You didn't know her name. You just saw clutter. You saw nothing. She pushed off the desk and began to pace. Then Orion clears throat the kitchen. I saw you send back a perfectly cooked Dobasol because you didn't like the look of it. You made Chef Antoine, a man with 3 Michelin stars, come out and apologize to you in front of his entire staff while you checked your phone. You humiliated a master artist over a whim. Clears throat. And then she said, stopping in front of him, there was Leo, a 19-year-old kid working 2 jobs to pay for night school. You didn't just fire him. You erased him for a few drops of water. You looked at him like he was an insect. She leaned down. My father saw brilliance in you, and he was right. You are a financial genius. A spark of something lit in his eyes. But you are a spiritual poison. She finished, and the spark died. You are a cancer in this company, Julian. You rule by fear, and the only thing fear breeds is resentment. And resentment? She gestured to the door where Vance was dragged away. Breeds betrayal. Robert Vance didn't betray DHG. He betrayed you. You need to understand that difference. This finally broke him. The brilliance compliment followed by the poison hit him. He wasn't just a bad boss. He was a failed leader. And for a man obsessed with winning, that was worse. So what? He choked out, his voice a growly ruin. It doesn't matter. It's over. What's over? She asked, her head tilted. Everything. He leapt up, the old arrogant Julian surging back for one last desperate moment. The Montlair deal, the leak. Vance gave Chen everything. The stock is going to open at 0. Our lines of credit will be pulled by noon. We're ruined. You inherited a corpse, Ms. Davenport. Congratulations on your dignity. He spat the last word. Amelia didn't flinch. She just looked at him with a kind of pity. It was this look more than her anger that finally defeated him. He slumped back into the chair. He was empty. You're still only playing one level of chess, Julian, she said, her voice soft. You're seeing the problem. You're not seeing the opportunity. What opportunity is there in annihilation? He growled. Oh, Julian. She almost smiled. You think Vance was the only one I was watching. You think you were the only one I was studying. She shook her head. I studied everyone, including David Chen. She began to pace again, the energy in the room shifting from a eulogy to a lecture. I didn't bump into him in the bar. That was a calculated intercept. And yes, the spill was intentional. But you're wrong about something. I didn't plant a bug. Julian looked up confused. Bugs are sloppy, she said. And illegal. I didn't need to when I was frantically dabbing at his laptop bag. I attached a micro GPS tracker to the zipper pull, and I smeared a clear fluorescent compound on his phone. One my college chem professor taught me. I knew he'd touch his phone, then his face, then his keys. I didn't need to hear his conversation. I just needed to know where he went next. Julian's mouth was slightly open. He went to his car, Amelia continued, and then he went to a parking garage in Midtown where he met Robert Vance. I had my own security team, the real one, not the hotel's, documenting the entire exchange. I have photos, Julian. High resolution of Vance handing over the first drive. The one you didn't even know about. So you have proof, Julian whispered. You can stop the story. Sue him. Stop it. Amelia laughed, a real cold laugh. No, I wrote it. You what I met with David Chen this afternoon at the New York Times building, not his rinky-dink office. He was arrogant just like you. He thought he had me. He thought I was the invisible brat trying to save her inheritance. He tried to blackmail me. He said he'd hold the story for a 20% stake in the company. My God, Julian breathed. And that Amelia said is when I showed him my file, the one on him, his gambling debts, the off-the-books source he paid for his last story. The fact that he was about to publish a story based on a source Vance who was also being paid by our biggest competitor, Victoria Blackstone. Julian's head snapped up. Blackstone, the woman from dinner. She was in on this. Of course, Amelia said, as if it was obvious. She wanted the Montclair deal for herself. She used Vance's hatred for you to get the intel. Vance thought he was a patriot. He was just a pawn like everyone else. But David Chen hates being a pawn. So she went on, clears throat, offered him a new deal, a choice. He could publish Vance's story, be exposed as a fraud, and be sued into oblivion by me, DHG, and probably Victoria Blackton for good measure. Or he could get the greatest story of his career, the real one. What real story? The one I gave him, Amelia said. The one that's going to press right about now. She checked her simple watch. Yes, 10:30 p.m. The story of a corporation poisoned by a tyrannical, paranoid CEO. Julian's face darkened. You're destroying me who is brought to the brink of collapse by a backstabbing executive. She continued steamrolling his interruption, only to be saved at the last possible second by the undercover heir. A woman who worked as a waitress, who rooted out the corruption from the inside, and who has now taken control to save her father's legacy. A story about karma, about justice, about a new generation. She leaned against the desk. The market hates a tyrant, Julian, but my God does it love a savior. The stock will dip at the opening bell. The bad CEO news will hit. And then the undercover heir's story will blanket every network by 10 a.m. It's a comeback story. It's a legend. We won't just recover our stock price. We will be the most talked about, most beloved brand in the world by market close. Julian was breathing hard. He was seeing it. The chess moves. She wasn't one level ahead. She was 5. She wasn't just saving the company. She was building a mythology around it. But what about Montclair? He whispered, grasping at the last straw. The deal is dead. They'll never sell to us after this chaos. Oh, Julian. Amelia's clear-throat smile was genuinely sad for him. You're still not thinking. Why do you think I let this play out? Why do you think I let the chaos story leak first? Because Julian's eyes went wide. The blood drained from his face. Oh, no. Oh, yes, Amelia said. Mr. Grayson, would you like to tell him? Grayson, who had been standing by the door like a silent executioner, finally spoke. His voice was dry as dust. At 9 p.m. tonight, I called the Montclair board. I informed them off the record that our CEO, Mr. Thorne, was being removed in a corporate coup, and that our company was in free fall. They, of course, panicked. They thought the deal was vaporized. And at 9:30 p.m., Amelia picked up. I called them. I introduced myself as the new chairwoman, the savior. I told them that the company was now stable under my control, that I had purged the Thorne-era corruption, and that I was still interested in an acquisition. But given the enormous mess I'd inherited, our original offer was, of course, impossible. You didn't, Julian said, horrified and a ruck. I offered them. 7 cents on the dollar, Amelia said. 30% less than your brilliant offer. I told them to take it or I'd walk, and they'd be left holding the bag with a toxic asset. They accepted unanimously. The papers were signed by Mr. Grayson's team. She checks her watch again. 15 minutes ago. She had done it. She hadn't just plugged the leak. She had weaponized it. She had used the leak, the betrayal, and Julian's own toxic reputation as a battering ram to get the deal of a lifetime. Clear's throat. She had in one night saved him, fired Vans exposed, Blackstone won over the press, and secured the Montclair deal for a 30% discount. Julian Thorne, the man who lived for the win, was looking at the single greatest corporate victory he had ever witnessed. And it had been executed by the nothing he'd tried to crush in a service hallway. He did the one thing he'd never done. He laughed. It was a strange, rusty, broken sound. "You're a monster," he said, but he said it with pure, unadulterated admiration. "No," Amelia said, her face hardening. "I'm a Davenport, and you, Julian, are still my employee, which brings us to your new terms." He sobered up instantly. "You're firing me." It was a statement. No, he was genuinely shocked. "But just after what I said, what I did, I'm not firing you, Julian. You are, as I said, the most brilliant financial mind in the industry. But you're a wild dog, and you've been off the leash for too long. I'm putting you on a leash." She walked over to him, leaning down just as she had in the hallway, placing her hands on the arms of his chair. He was trapped. "I am the chairwoman. You are the CEO. You will report to me. You will not hire or fire anyone, not even a busboy, without my written approval. You will learn the names of the Orion kitchen staff. You will learn the names of the 40th floor housekeepers, and you will treat them with the respect my father built this company on. Is that understood?" "Yes," he said, his voice. "I don't believe you," she said pleasantly. "You don't understand dignity yet. You only understand winning. So you're going to learn my sabbatical." He asked your re-education. She counted 6 weeks paid because we are not monsters. You will, however, be clocking in and out just like everyone else. She began to pace. Week 1, the dish pit at Orion. You'll report to Carlos. You'll be scrubbing 10 hours a day. Week 2, laundry. You'll be in the basement with the steam. Clears throat. Week 3, housekeeping. You will report to Sophia, the woman you insulted. You will learn to clean a toilet and make a bed with hospital corners. Week 4, bellhop. You will carry bags, Julian, and you will smile. Week 5, concage. You will learn to solve problems for people other than yourself. She stopped in front of him. Clears throat. And week 6, your final week, you will be a waiter at Orion. You will report to Marcus, and your first official act will be to find Leo. You will rehire him. You will give him a check for his back pay with interest and a bonus from your personal account. And you will apologize not as a CEO, as a man. And if I don't believe you're sincere, you'll do it again. She straightened up. At the end of Clear's throat, those 6 weeks, if you've learned something, you can have this office back, and we will be the most formidable team in this industry. If you haven't, I'll find another brilliant mind. One who understands that you can't be a leader if no one is willing to follow. It was an impossible choice. It was utter humiliation. It was exactly what he deserved. He looked at this woman, this girl. He saw the waitress in her cheap uniform, but now he saw the layers beneath the steel, the staggering, terrifying intelligence, the core of decency. He'd long since forgotten. He was a man who respected power. He was a man who respected winning. He was looking at the undisputed champion. A slow, reluctant, and utterly genuine smile spread across his face. "When?" he asked. "Do I start tomorrow?" Amelia said. 6 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." He stood up. He was still taller, but he felt smaller. He nodded. "Yes, Miss Davenport." "Good. Get out of my office," she said, her voice suddenly tired. He turned and walked to the elevator. He didn't look back. The doors slid shut. Amelia stood alone in the vast, silent penthouse office. Mr. Grayson stepped forward. "A remarkable performance, Miss Davenport. Your father would be astounded." Amelia sagged, the adrenaline finally leaving her. She leaned against the desk. "He'd be furious I let it get this bad, Mr. Grayson." She kicked off her cheap, sensible shoes and rubbed her feet. "God, I'm exhausted." "What now?" Grayson asked. "A bottle of 1945 Mutant Rothschild to celebrate. It was your father's favorite." Amelia looked at him and smiled, the steel gone replaced by the 25-year-old girl underneath. "No, I have to go," she says, grabbing her jacket. "I have to get to the subway. I'm going to be late on my share of the rent, and my roommate Chloe gets really cranky." She walked out of the penthouse, leaving the Billionaire's view behind, and headed home. The Queen, for now, was returning to Queens. And so the tyrant CEO, who believed a person's worth was measured in dollars, found himself measuring his worth in polished forks and clean sheets. Amelia Davenport didn't just take her father's company, she took control. She proved the true power isn't about shouting you're nothing from a penthouse. It's about having the strength, the intelligence, and the heart to see the everything in everyone else. The king was humbled, the waitress became the queen, and the Davenport empire was finally in the right hands. What did you think of Amelia's incredible power move? Have you ever met a boss like Julian Thorne? Let me know your favorite part of the story in the comments below. If you loved this drama, please like this video. Share it with a friend who loves a good twist, and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell. We have new stories coming every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.